We saw that the quotient rule gives us the ability to find the derivative of the quotient of two functions as long as we know the derivatives of those two functions. One great way to use the quotient function is to fill out our roster of the trigonometric functions. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. All right, so in this video, I'm going to find the derivative of the tangent of x just from what we already know without going back to the limit definition. The reason I can do that is because the tangent of x, we've seen one of the identities is that the tangent is the sine of x over cosine of x. So I can find the derivative of this function using the quotient rule. All right, so I'm going to do it just like I did in the last video. F of x is my numerator function, which is sine of x. G of x is my denominator function, which is cosine of x. I remember the derivative of sine is cosine, and the derivative of cosine is negative sine. Okay, so that's enough information for me to, I'm going to plug these values into the quotient rule. So h prime of x is equal to this product here, cosine of x times cosine of x, minus this product here, sine of x times negative sine of x, and my denominator is going to be g of x, my denominator, squared. And remember, when we're doing trig functions, we don't put the squared over the x because that would be confusing. We're going to do it over cosine squared of x to make it clear that we're taking the cosine of x and then squaring that. Okay, let's see what we can do about simplifying this and cleaning it up a little bit. So cosine of x times cosine of x is cosine squared of x. Negative sine of x times negative sine of x, the negatives cancel each other out. And we've got positive sine squared of x. And then in the denominator, we have cosine squared of x. And again, remember, one of the identities we had, one of the trig identities, is that the cosine squared of x plus the sine squared of x is always equal to 1. So the derivative of tangent is 1 over cosine of x. And traditionally, we're going to remember our identity that 1 over cosine is equal to secant. Tangent of x is equal to secant squared of x. All right, so that gives you an idea of how you can use the quotient rule to figure out that the derivative of tangent is secant squared. Okay, and here's what I'm going to do. You can go through this for the other three trig functions, because remember, we know that cotangent is equal to cosine x over sine of x. We know that secant of x is equal to 1 over cosine of x, and the cosecant of x is equal to 1 over the sine of x. So we can really use the quotient rule for all four of these functions. And rather than do that, you can grab a sheet of paper and practice those yourself and see how you are with your trig identities. But here is the upshot of it. And all of this is written on our derivatives and limits reference sheet. That we just saw that the derivative of tangent is secant squared. The derivative of cotangent is negative cosecant squared of x. The derivative of secant of x, if you use the quotient rule, you're going to come up with some expression, but it can be simplified as secant x times tangent of x. And again, the derivative of cosecant of x is equal to negative cosecant of x times cotangent of x. One of the things that is a little bit annoying about the AP exam is that there are no reference sheets at all, as long as it's the way it is traditionally. When we had the weird pandemic year where we were taking the AP exam in 2020, it was essentially an open book test, and they just kind of knew that everybody had the formulas. To the best of my knowledge, they did not decide that that was a successful experiment. So when we look at things like the reference sheet, which has the product rule, the quotient rule, the power rule, basic properties, the common derivatives, um, take advantage of this sheet to help you with the problems. But at the same time, as you're looking at all of these things, have it in your mind that when you take the AP exam, this isn't going to be here. And so you'll have to work on memorizing the product rule and the quotient rule and all of the basic things. I will show you wherever I can tips to let you kind of recreate them in the middle of a test if you panic and forget. But for instance, you can use the quotient rule to evaluate all of these things. So all you really need to memorize is sine and cosine, and then have a little bit of free time in the middle of a test so that you can derive other things. If that's the kind of thing that sounds fun to you, then you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, you know you. Um, so that's, at any rate, that fills out our roster of all of the trig functions. Uh, and so the quotient rule works out for us there.